Coming up in the bulletin, Supreme Court unanimously dismisses application seeking to prohibit trial High Court judge from hearing the Edubwine case. Also this afternoon, Attorney General files 24 charges against former CEO of the National Food and Buffer Stock Company, NAFCO, Hanan Abdul Hanan, and his wife, and 3 others over stealing, willfully causing financial loss to the state, and money laundering. And later on, we tell you why the Minority Caucus is demanding suspension of the vetting of Paul Bafuboni as Chief Justice until all legal challenges concerning the removal of Justice Gertrude Tokono are resolved in court. This is the Midday News on 3FM 92.7. My name is Grace Hammoah Agyemang. Welcome. Many thanks for joining us here on radio and also on our various social media platforms on Facebook, 3FM927, Instagram, 3FM927, to all of you on TikTok, 3FM927, and other social media platforms. Let's begin the bulletin from here. This afternoon, the minority in Parliament is demanding the suspension of the vetting of Paul Bafuboni as Chief Justice until all outstanding legal challenges concerning the removal of Chief Justice Gertrude Tokono are resolved in court. In the motion filed at the Speaker's office, we understand the NPP lawmakers are asking the Speaker to halt all processes by the Appointment Committee, citing current cases at the High Court and the ECOWAS Court. The Appointment Committee has scheduled to vet the Chief Justice nominee on November 10, 2025. Let's connect with our correspondent, Christian Yali, for more on this. Christian, we know the removed CJ has about 3 pending cases in court. Walk us through those and what the minority is saying.
Exactly, Grace. So what we know is that she had earlier filed a case at the Supreme Court, which was to challenge the removal process itself, i.e. what the Appointment Committee was seeking to do. Many lawyers would argue that that case technically is moot because that process by the Appointment Committee has already taken place, which has resulted in her removal. But after the removal itself, we know that she had gone to the High Court, for instance, with about 2 cases. One of the cases was to challenge her removal as a judge on the Supreme Court panel. So the case she made in that suit was that even if the president had removed her from office as the Chief Justice, she has that right to remain on the Supreme Court bench. Now, that case, we understand the Attorney General responded to it and even wanted it to be transmitted to the Supreme Court because of the constitutional issue involved in that. It needs some interpretation. And then there is another case at the High Court as well, which is seeking to more or less get her to be reinstated, and also asking that if anything at all, there should be a halt to the appointment of Justice Paul Bafuboni, as well as even his vetting. And we know that at the one at the ECOWAS Court as well. So these are some of the issues surrounding her legal cases pending at the court. But we also even know that somewhere last week, when Parliament resumed, the Speaker referred her appointment to the Appointment Committee, and last week Friday, the committee had what we call the preliminary meeting among the committee members to schedule a date for his vetting, which is the date that has been released, which is 10th November, which is next week, Monday, which is what the minority currently is fighting again and seeking to stop that vetting that has been slated for 10th November.
All right, Christian, what more demands are the minority MPs making?
In fact, they want the Attorney General to be brought before the plenary, as in brought before Parliament, to give some explanations or to give some updates on all of these cases that the former Chief Justice Gertrude Tokono has filed at the court and what their current status are. And also, they are seeking that if anything at all, the vetting itself of the appointed Chief Justice, Paul Bafuboni, should be put on hold. That is contained in the memo which they have sent to the clerk to Parliament, i.e. to the Speaker of Parliament, seeking this kind of directive.
And are there any implications should the Speaker not grant their request? Do we know?
In fact, what we know is that the minority leader himself on a number of occasions has indicated that they would not boycott the vetting of the new CJ, Paul Bafuboni. However, we know from last week, one of the demands, so one of the things that the minority has been saying is to more or less lambast the Parliament Committee for what they term as unfair and unconstitutional, removal process. And so based on the outcome of this, whether the Speaker grants the request they are making or not, we would see if indeed they are going to participate in the vetting of Paul Bafuboni or they would abstain from the vetting. So we cannot tell exactly what the action is going to be, but we know from instances in the past that they had maintained that they would participate in the vetting. But we look forward to how interesting things will turn out to be. Exactly.
Christian, thank you for bringing us those updates. My colleague Christian Yali updating us on that injunction by the minority to stop the vetting of Justice Paul Bafuboni as a new Chief Justice. Let's stay a while longer on this and speak to the Executive Director of the Parliamentary Network Africa, Sammy Obeng. Mr. Obeng, thank you for joining us on the Media News on 3FM 92.7.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Can Parliament legally suspend the vetting of a Chief Justice nominee due to ongoing court cases?
Well, I don't see it as a straightforward situation. First of all, it is within the rights of the members of Parliament who have filed the motion to file a motion. I mean, Parliament standing orders provides the opportunity for members of Parliament who think that a matter needs to be given a particular attention to file a motion. There are rules regarding admissibility of these motions and how these motions get adopted. So what kind of voting arrangements need to take place, adoption of such motions, etc. So first point that needs to be noted is that members of Parliament have the right to file motions for which they have exercised that particular right. But it's also important that Parliament also has a responsibility to give prior approval in instances of such nominations for which the nomination of the Chief Justice has been brought before Parliament and has been assigned to a committee of Parliament. So Parliament is the Parliamentary Committee on Appointments is the responsibility to go through the vetting process and ensure that what needs to be done gets done. Now, if the argument is being made that because there are actions going on outside of Parliament, the processes that are within Parliament must cease until all of such actions, and the motion was quite specific. It asks that this be seized until all of such actions, including the one in the ECOWAS court, including any other thing that is happening so far as these matters are concerned, gets finished with. A question that lay people would ask themselves, and I'm sure the legal people will also weigh into it, is that for a co-equal branch of government like Parliament, is it appropriate that the hands of Parliament is stayed pending issues that are happening in different courts under different circumstances on different subject matters, which Parliament does not even have clearer indications on the timelines within which these matters would be determined. I think that is a tricky one, and I look forward to how Parliament will treat this particular motion, because it certainly will be a matter for the plenary to look at.
Right, so we know that Parliament in itself is a house of its own, like we say, a house of its laws and records. How do these cases in the various areas, like you mentioned in the High Court and also the ECOWAS Court, affect Paul Bafuboni's nomination and judicial independence?
Well, I mean, judicial independence is one that cannot be toyed with. Everywhere that democracy exists, everywhere that constitutionality exists, judicial independence is one of those points that get espoused. It is, however, important also that Parliament, as an arm of government, has a responsibility to discharge its duties. This is not the very first time that a matter has come up in Parliament that needs to be determined by Parliament, which also has other
extensions in other areas,
in the court. Exactly, and we have precedent so far as these matters are concerned, and that's why I say that it's within the rights of the members of Parliament to file the motion as they have filed it, but it's also within the responsibility of Parliament to do exactly what the Constitution mandates it to do.
How would you want to see this pan out eventually?
First of all, I think the members of Parliament must be given their right to be heard on the motion that they have filed.
Okay.
I mean, it's only fair that if they file a motion, the motion is taken through the processes as enshrined by enshrined in the standing orders of Parliament. And so nobody should seek to guard these members of Parliament from exercising their legitimate duty of filing a motion and speaking to that particular motion. However, these members of Parliament must also know that motions once filed must go through a particular laid-down procedure in Parliament, which includes admissibility. And so if you do not meet the admissibility test, then it cannot be administered. Once you meet the admissibility test, there is also a bit about it being debated in the House. It's being voted on. There are numbers that must count so far as votings are concerned. So if you want to come to equity, you must come with clean hands.
Clean hands,
once you've been given the opportunity to be able to exercise your rights, you must also know that there are other parts of the Constitution and standing orders of the Parliament of Ghana which must play out. If they play out in your favor, voila. If they don't, of course, you take it as it is.
All right. Mr. Obeng, thank you for talking to us. Samuel Obeng is Executive Director of the Parliamentary Network Africa. Let's just stay with issues of law and the courts, because the Supreme Court has unanimously dismissed application to prohibit presiding judge in the Kwabena Agyemang trial from further hearing the case on grounds of bias. The Apex Court held that the application was without and did not meet the requirements to prohibit the trial judge. Former Signals Bureau Director Kwabena Agyemang and his wife arrived at the Supreme Court in the company of their lawyers led by Samuel Atachia. Kwabena Agyemang's lawyers led by Samuel Atachia had filed an application to prohibit the High Court Judge Justice Eugene Nyedu Nyante from hearing the case on grounds of alleged bias. We are working the phone to speak to my colleague, Lord Edward Sari, who joins us now. Lord, are the lawyers successful in their application? Talk to us about the proceedings in courts this morning.
Well, so Beatrice, lawyers of Kwabena Agyemang led by Samuel Atachia moved the application to prohibit the trial judge Justice Eugene Nyedu Nyante on a number of grounds. 4 of them actually. For example, they indicated that the judge blocked the disclosures of exculpatory documents or evidence which otherwise would have helped the case. Again, he indicated that the trial judge showed a special likeliness to the case because he, for example, apportioned about 4 or 5 hours to that case. Again, indicated that the trial judge allowed the prosecution led by the Deputy Attorney General to stampede his decision-making, the timelines of his decision-making. And so he relied on this and then prayed the Supreme Court, to prohibit the trial judge, indicating that he had been biased in the manner in which he had presided over the case. Now, responding to that argument, the Deputy Attorney General, Dr. Justice Remsai, indicated that the defense lawyer was misinforming the Apex Court in that, for example, in the disclosing the exculpatory evidence, the trial judge, the defense lawyer alleged that the prosecution removed certain portions from the document that they disclosed. Now, these portions, they argue that would have helped the case, but according to the Deputy Attorney General, he indicated that they only disclosed the part which was relevant to the case. And so it's not the case that they had some documents which should have helped them and then decided to keep it away from the defense lawyers. After listening to the arguments from both sides of the divide, the 5-member panel, presided over by Justice Avery Lovelace Johnson, held that the application to prohibit the trial judge, 1, lacked merit, and 2, did not meet the threshold to be considered for the prohibition of the trial judge. And so unanimously threw that application away, Beatrice.
Lord, what does this mean to the case, and when is the next hearing, briefly for me?
Grace, so basically what this means is that Hammoah Agyemang would have to go back to the High Court. And you recall that last week they walked out of the court premises after the High Court judge refused to grant them adjournment. Now, he's going to go back, and then the case will continue from where it left off. In that, for right now, prosecution are on their second witness, who is delivering his witness statements. And so this second witness is the financial director of the National Signals Bureau. So her evidence will continue to be taken, and then cross-examination will be done. We spoke to Hammoah Agyemang, who gave his reaction to the decision of the AFS court. We can listen to that.
Right.
Your request to have the judge prohibited obviously has been turned down by the Supreme Court. Your immediate reaction?
Well, I'm disappointed but not discouraged. We'll see how the case will come.
How does it feel going back to the same court that you...
It doesn't move me at all. The only persuasion a judge will have is the law. I'm not going to have a banter with him. I'm not going to fight him over anything. I'm just going to project the law. It doesn't move me at all.
Are you looking at appealing against this decision?
Yeah, this is a 5-0, so that is a tall order. You mean review?
Yeah.
That's a tall. So jump.
That was Samuel Atachian, who is leader of Kwabena Aduboahing's lawyers. This is the midday news on 3FM 92.7. Let's do other stories now. The Office of the Attorney General and Minister for Justice has filed a total of 24 charges against embattled former Chief Executive Officer of the National Food and Buffer Stock Company, NAFCO, his wife Faiza Said-Wuni, and 3 others, with a litany of offences, including stealing, conspiracies to steal, willfully causing financial loss to the state, using public office for profit, and money laundering. Let's take a closer look at the details of the charge sheet, and then we can hear from the Attorney General. One, the AG charges Hanan Abdul Wahab, Aludiba, and others in NAFCO scandal. Total counts 24, total accused persons or entities 5. Most frequent offense, money laundering, which has 6 counts. Hanan Abdul Wahab Aludiba is the main accused and implicated in 20 out of 24 counts. The key charges are stealing, 4 counts, fraudulently causing financial loss, 4 counts, money laundering, 6 counts, defrauding by false pretenses, 2 counts, intentional or fraudulent loss of public funds, 2 counts, conspiracy to commit fraud or money laundering, 2 counts, using public office for profit, 4 counts. His wife, who is Faiza Said-Wuni, is also facing 6 counts of money laundering with Hanan and others, 2 counts of defrauding by false pretenses, 9.8 million Ghana cedis with his husband Hanan, and 1 count of dishonestly receiving 4.4 million Ghana cedis. Richard Sam Asante is facing 4 counts of causing financial loss with tune of 60.7 million Ghana cedis with Hanan, 2 counts of fraudulent loss of public accounts amounting to 4.6 million Ghana cedis, 1 count of abetment of stealing 5.4 million Ghana cedis, 2 counts of conspiracy, fraud or money laundering. The Aludiba Foundation is also facing 6 counts of money laundering with Hanan and others, and 2 counts of conspiracy, fraud and money laundering. And the Energy Partners facing 6 counts of money laundering with Hanan, Faiza and the Aludiba Foundation. So that is a summary of all the 24 charges leveled against the CEO of the National Food Buffer Stock. Let's listen to what the AG has been saying in relation to these counts.
The buffer stock investigation, which are nicknamed the Rumble in the Jungle, as at March 2020, when we announced the arrest and detention of suspects Kwabena Aduboahing and his wife Angela Agyemang, the Economic and Organized Crime Office had gathered credible intelligence regarding a criminal enterprise that had been operated by the former Chief Executive Officer of the National Food and Buffer Stock Company Limited, Mr. Hanan Abdul Wahab. Initial estimate put the amount of money pilfered by Mr. Abdul Wahab and his collaborators at the time at around 58 million Ghana cedis, far in excess of the 49 million suspected to have been stolen by Mr. Aduboahing and his co-accused persons. I call the criminal enterprise operated by Abdul Wahab and his collaborators at Buffer Stock the Rumble in the Jungle, not only because of the huge amount of money at stake but because of the fact that while food suppliers were wailing and gnashing their teeth due to failure to pay them for supplies to the buffer stock, and while our school kids were being denied nutrition under the school feeding program for lack of funds, Mr. Abdul Wahab and his collaborators were busy lawlessly looting funds meant for the program. That is jungle behavior. The informal meaning of the word rumble is to discover illicit activity or the perpetrator of the illicit activity.
Attorney General there. Now let's do other stories now. The Ministry of Health will in the next week start the rollout of a new digital system after the National Health Insurance System electronic platform disruptions. A recent nationwide service disruption to the existing clinical information and billing systems affected patients' care, health insurance verification, billing, claims processing, and continuity of care. A new government-managed system, the Ghana Health Information Management System, GIMS, will now serve as a main platform for patient registration, clinical documentation, insurance verification, billing, claim submission to the National Health Insurance Authority, and continuity of care records. Here's Health Minister Kwabena Mintah Akando.
What were the issues? The issues, one, was that the software didn't belong to the state. And so when we are going for any new software, the software must be for the state. And so today we have GIMS. And the GIMS is Ghana Health Information Management System. And not for any individual. The next solution was the fact that there was nothing like any exchange. We realized that we were going through these difficulties because the system was monopolized. It was only one person we were dealing with. What is the solution? The plan going forward is that in the next 1 week, we are going to begin with the teaching hospitals, the regional hospitals, and the highly populated district hospitals to roll them over.
Health Minister Kwabena Mintah Akando speaking at the just ended Government Accountability Series in Accra. Now, breast cancer remains a growing concern in Ghana. But what does it mean to receive comprehensive care for the disease? As Ghana joins the rest of the world to intensify awareness of the disease, this month, my colleague Sarah Penkro has been exploring the journey of breast cancer patients in Ghana in the documentary Ghana's Pink Ribbon, set to be premiered at 9 p.m. today. Here are excerpts.
It's been 3 long years for Joyce Maldima. 3 years of uncertainty, 3 years of active treatment, and 3 years without the quickest evidence of being feminine, her breasts.
The underwire in the bra came off, pressing down on the breast. So when I got home and I found out that it had actually come out from the fabric and was piercing down on the skin, you know. There was no wound, no opening or anything. After that, there was no pain. And so I thought that, oh, that will just go away. But the whole place became red. Then it became black, then it became so hard. And then I realized that the breast was just growing bigger. I don't confidently mingle with people. I dress well, you don't even notice, but I've lost 2 of my breasts. And that's alone in my head, it's enough for me to, most of the time, I choose places I want to go or socialize and all that. I'm okay with family, but when we have other people around, I'm not too okay.
24-year-old Rita is part of the younger generations diagnosed with breast cancer. Hers is an aggressive type.
It was fibroadenoma. I even searched for it, and it was like, before it would turn to cancer, maybe 2 to 3 years time before it can turn to cancer. But within, I think it was just in 3 months, 4 months time, and it just escalated. So
And you can get the full documentary on TV3 tonight at 9 p.m. by my colleague Sarah Apenko. We've been doing a lot of awareness on Pinktober. You don't want to miss out on the full story and hear from these survivors of breast cancer. Let's do other stories now. The Ghana Civil Aviation Authority has assured airline operators, aviation stakeholders, and the traveling public that comprehensive contingency measures have been activated to ensure the continued safe, reliable, and secure provision of air traffic services across the Accra Flight Information Region. This follows the announcement by the Ghana Air Traffic Safety Electronics Association of a nationwide strike effective Thursday, October 30. In a statement, the authority said management has developed and implemented a contingency plan for its communication, navigation, and surveillance or air traffic management systems to maintain operational continuity and prevent disruptions to both domestic and international flight operations. The authority has therefore urged all stakeholders, airlines, and members of the traveling public to remain calm and confident in the measures that have been put in place. And to other stories now, the National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values has renewed calls for Parliament to expedite the passage of the anti-LGBTQ plus bill, urging that it be treated as a public bill rather than a private member's bill. At a media briefing, Secretary General Moses Famoni emphasized that the bill reflects the will of the Ghanaian people. On Tuesday, the Speaker of Parliament, Alban Bagbin, ruled that the anti-LGBT bill will be reintroduced and passed again by Parliament for onward assent by the President.
I will wish that the President's desire that the Attorney General brings the bill, that for me will be better. Because the technical problems with the private member's bill, that it should not impose a charge on, the consolidated fund, will still be subsisting with this private member's bill. And mind you, the case that Richard Sky took to court was never determined on its merits. It was thrown out on a preliminary objection that there was not an enactment before the Supreme Court. But the merits, some of which he raised as to these technicalities and raised that, investigation, trial, imprisonment, all of that would impose a cost onto the state. If you brought the same private member's bill, it will suffer from the same defect. So in my own considered legal opinion, it would be good if the President's desire that we have a public bill brought by the Attorney General.
And Moses Famoni is the Secretary General of the National Coalition for Proper Human Sexual Rights and Family Values. That will be all for the media news on 3FM 92.7. It came to you live from our studios here at Adesawe Kanda, Accra. Before we go, stories that came through as headlines. Supreme Court unanimously dismisses application seeking to prohibit trial High Court judge from hearing the Edu Buahini case. Also, Attorney General files 24 charges against former CEO of the National Food Buffer Stock, NAFCO, and Minority Caucus demands suspension of the vetting of Paul Bafuboni as Chief Justice. Many thanks for joining us. Log on to 3news.com and get some more stories. To all of you on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, TikTok, thank you for joining us. Bismarck Ewusa is standing by to bring us the latest in the world of business. Good afternoon.
Follow us on social media, Twitter at 3FM927, Facebook at 3FM927, and also on 3news.com.
Accra gets busy on this frequency. 92.7 3FM.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck Ewusa. Coming up this afternoon, fuel prices set for major drop from November 1. Petroleum products to see biggest reduction yet in 2025 on back of stronger cedi and falling global oil prices. Also coming up, upcoming 2026 budget expected to stay within fiscal responsibility limits, signaling Ghana's return to fiscal discipline and sustainability. We'll bring you details. Plus, Food and Beverages Association of Ghana calls for tariff freeze after ECG financial scandal. We'll hear from Executive Chairman John Awuni.
Clearly confirms FABAC's position that there must be efficiency in the power sector in ECG before any tariff increment.
We will bring you details of our headlines and other stories shortly. Please stay. Thanks for your company. Now to the details. The price of petroleum products is expected to fall significantly at the pumps from Friday, November 1, 2025, in what could be the biggest reduction so far this year. This is according to the latest pricing outlook by the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies, COMAC, which cites a stronger cedi and lower global crude prices as the main drivers of the anticipated cuts. The following 3 Business News Desk report has details. The price of fuel is projected to drop sharply across major oil marketing companies beginning this weekend. According to the Chamber of Oil Marketing Companies, petrol prices are expected to fall by up to 5.21% per litre, bringing the pump price down to about 12 cedis 92 pesos from the previous 13 cedis 93 pesos. Diesel could also record a much steeper decline of between 6 and 8%, selling at around 13 cedis 10 pesos per litre, while liquefied petroleum gas (LPG) is projected to decrease by more than 6% to about 13 cedis 60 pesos per kilogram. The chamber attributes the expected reductions to a combination of falling global crude prices and the cedi's strong appreciation in October. The local currency gained over 11% against the US dollar during the second pricing window, almost reversing its third quarter losses. Internationally, crude oil prices have hit a 5-month low of $62.82 per barrel due to global supply concerns and weakened demand from major economies. Industry analysts say the anticipated price cuts could ease pressure on transport fares, reduce inflationary risks, and offer much-needed relief to consumers nationwide. And that was a 3 Business News Desk report on fuel prices set for major drop from November 1 on the back of stronger cedi and falling global oil prices. Moving on, the upcoming 2026 budget is expected to stay within the Fiscal Responsibility Act's 1.5% primary surplus limit, signaling Ghana's return to fiscal discipline and sustainability. That's according to IC Research, which says the government has shown enough policy credibility to maintain fiscal balance even after exiting the International Monetary Fund program next year. The following 3 Business News Desk report has details. The 2026 budget is expected to stay within the 1.5% primary surplus ceiling set under the Fiscal Responsibility Act. According to IC Research, a leading financial markets research firm, the government has demonstrated sufficient policy credibility to remain within the fiscal limits in 2026. Data show that Ghana recorded a primary surplus equivalent to 1.1% of gross domestic product in the first 8 months of 2025, with the International Monetary Fund expressing optimism that the country will achieve the target surplus of 1.5% by the end of the year. IC Research believes this would mark the first effective compliance with the Fiscal Responsibility Act since its introduction in 2018, confirming Ghana's steady return to fiscal sustainability. However, the firm warns that continued revenue shortfalls and rising expenditure pressures could test the government's resolve to sustain fiscal discipline beyond the IMF program. The 2026 budget is scheduled to be presented to Parliament on November 13 by the Finance Minister, Dr. Kasiel Atoforsen. This is still Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck. Also, to some other stories. Vice President Professor Nana Opoku-Agyemang has cautioned against complacency in safeguarding recent economic progress despite notable improvements in key indicators. Speaking at the Ghana Economic Forum organized by the BFT, she says the appreciation of the cedi and falling inflation must not lead to laxity. She insists that the progress is the result of deliberate government action and maintaining it will require continued discipline and collaboration.
This is not the time for complacency. It is a time for consolidation. To make this recovery durable, we must do a few things. First, we must add value to what we produce. The cedi will never be as strong as it should be if we continue to export, for example, cocoa beans instead of chocolate, bauxite instead of aluminium, and gold dust instead of jewelry. And we are happy that the Cocoa Board and the Gold Board are leading reforms to fix this. Every stage of processing that happens in Ghana keeps value here, strengthens our city, creates jobs, and adds to our dignity as a people. Our farmers, artisans, and other professionals deserve to see the full reward of their labor at home. Additionally, we must empower small businesses and our youth.
And that was Vice President Professor Nana Opoku-Agyemang. Now to one of our headline stories. The Food and Beverages Association of Ghana, FABAG, is demanding a suspension of all electricity tariff adjustments following revelations of widespread financial indiscipline and operational inefficiencies at the ECG by Parliament's Public Accounts Committee, PAC. Executive Chairman of FABAG, Reverend John Aouni, asserts that the PAC's findings, which include ECG's failure to account for significant public funds, unapproved expenditures, and poor internal controls, vindicate their long-held position.
The Public Accounts Committee of Parliament, recent revelations of the massive financial indiscipline, financial recklessness of the ECG clearly confirms FABAG's position that there must be efficiency in the power sector in ECG before any tariff increment. The exposure clearly indicates that ECG has all the financial resources that they need and that there is no need for any tariff increment. The exposure also clearly indicates that until we align ECG system, until we reset this ECG system, until there is complete overhaul and efficiency in the ECG system, there is no amount of money that can be invested through tariff increments that will yield the required results.
And that was Executive Chairman of FABAG, Reverend John Aouni. Before we go, Ghana is at risk of being surpassed by emerging African oil powerhouses like Namibia and Senegal unless it urgently addresses fundamental structural and governance challenges in its petroleum sector. Petroleum economist and political risk analyst Dr. Theo Champon has cautioned. Dr. Champon stated that Ghana's approach, marked by heavy taxation and inconsistent policies, is stifling investor confidence and deterring sustained exploration.
The petroleum economist highlighted the stark contrast between Ghana's historical success and recent continental discoveries. While Ghana's reserves are estimated at about $1.5 billion barrels, Dr. Theo Champon revealed that Namibia alone has actually found in excess of $11 billion barrels and counting in a much shorter period. He criticized Ghana's desire to have our pick and eat it through high fiscal demands, stressing that the global oil industry requires competitive policies to attract major players, a strategy successfully being adopted by Ghana's neighbors. The economist further pointed to governance lapses at the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, citing overstaffing, political appointments, and weak corporate governance as significant impediments. He he asserted, adding that the GMPC must be managed with efficiency and professionalism to maximize the value of the nation's resources. Dr. Agyemang advised government to pivot from an over-reliance on fiscal measures to a strategy of building strong value chains and industrial linkages within the oil and gas sector to drive long-term growth and prevent the country from discussing the same challenges a decade from now.
And that was a 3 Business News Desk report on petroleum economist Dr. Agyemang, warning that policy inconsistency and governance lapses risk Ghana's oil future. And that brings us to the end of Business Daily on 3FM 92.7 with me, Bismarck Ausa. For more business stories, please check out our website 3news.com. Urban Blend is next with Black Rasta. Please stay.